The African Anti-Corruption Day is observed to coordinate and intensify cooperation against the vice, with emphasis laid on the role of efficient judicial systems. Tonight, we'll look at the form and consequences of corruption in societies. Some 26,000 youth volunteers join in actions to beat the coronavirus in Cameroon. Through community education and information, they've reached out to about 10 million persons in 328 subdivisions. The national station innovates and renders the 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. weekend newscast more enticing and informative. A dual presentation is introduced to link regions and render digestive content to listeners. Good evening, and those were the headlines of the 7:30 news. Thanks for joining us.
The wearing of face masks in public places will be mandatory until further notice.
You're welcome back. We begin our half-hour newscast with the observance of the 4th African Anti-Corruption Day on the theme Fighting Corruption Through Effective and Efficient Judicial Systems. The day, instituted by the African Union, encourages member states to coordinate and to intensify cooperation in the fight against the vice, while Cameroon used the opportunity to present CONAC's actions to prevent the embezzlement of over 1,000 billion CFA francs in 7 years. Moki Edwin Kinzika in the following report looks at the different facets of corruption and its consequences.
AU member states dedicate a day to combat corruption because the multifaceted practice is dangerous. Imagine that in 7 years, CONAC saved 1,652 billion 582 million francs from being siphoned. The AU also identifies political corruption or kleptocracy, that is, illegal acts by office holders for private gain under the cover of law, as dangerous. It is the misuse of government power, like in repression. Bribery, extortion, nepotism, parochialism, graft, embezzlement, influence peddling, and money laundering are some of the AU-targeted cankerworms to nip in the bud. This day sounds a warning bell that corruption undermines democracy. In elections, it reduces accountability and distorts representation in policymaking. In the judiciary, corruption compromises the rule of law. In public administration, it results in inefficient provision of services and violates republicanism. Quite often, accusing fingers are only pointed at some senior state functionaries. No. Little illegal fees paid in the neighborhoods are also acts of corruption. Little rats can work the community's granules in a short period of time and are as such as dangerous as the white-collar thieves they accuse.
Beyond the rankings given by organs like Transparency International, where Cameroon has occupied an unenviable position in the Corruption Perception Index, the head of state, Paul Biya, has on several occasions warned against the embezzlement of public funds. With the prosecution of corrupt officials ongoing and the recovery of misappropriated funds effective, Cameroonians believe that the fight must be intensified for the well-being of the population. Victor Seeger sampled the opinions and now reports.
Embezzlement, bribery are among other terms used to talk about corruption, a term perceived differently by individuals.
Corruption is simply rendering services with strings attached, generally for selfish purposes. Maybe you want to favor some other person or yourself.
Well, corruption, to the best of my knowledge, is when undue services are being rendered. It's not within your normal service.
It was only whispered about, but there are signs of growing intolerance against the phenomenon. Many say it is a strong equation to solve.
It cannot be eradicated fully, but we can minimize it if all Cameroonians can have good conscience.
The anti-corruption is doing his work, but I think the work is not efficient. We know those who are corrupt, we know them.
But many city dwellers are divided about how to go about the fight against it.
I think we can fight this by denouncing them. We don't have the strength to practice that.
For this particular problem to be solved, the government should not only bring out policies to solve the problem, but then see how to implement and enforce these policies on the people. One of the major ways to fight this corruption is not only a top-down approach, but a bottom-top approach.
The population, though aware of its impact, harbor the hope of witnessing its end in Cameroon.
In one of our top stories, over 26,000 youth volunteers in Cameroon have been assisting health teams in the fight against COVID-19 through community education and information. Their role in the campaign was saluted by Prime Minister Joseph John Goutey during the interministerial meeting to monitor government's riposte strategy yesterday. Christian Chiatam now presents how important their contribution has been.
Apart from its medical and economic aspects, the government's response strategy against COVID-19 contains a social component. Animated mainly by youth volunteers, it entails the proximity education of local communities on COVID-19 in order to facilitate the work of health workers. During yesterday's interministerial meeting chaired by Prime Minister Joseph John Goutey, it was revealed that 26,347 youth volunteers have been on the field in Cameroon so far. Drawn from the Civic Service Agency, the National Youth Council and the National Volunteering Service, as well as other youth movements, they have supported the awareness campaign launched by the Ministry of Communication, as well as other initiatives by the Ministry of Public Health to educate the people on the causes, symptoms, and modes of prevention of COVID-19. They have also taken part in the fabrication of masks, hydroalcoholic gel, and other anti-COVID materials. In the course of Friday's meeting, the Minister of Youth Affairs and Civic Education, Monona Futsu, expressed his gratitude to the head of state for permitting the reorientation of funds initially destined for the civilian activities of the National Day to be used in the anti-COVID campaign by youth volunteers. He said his ministry is planning to send more youth volunteers to council across the country to support the campaign against COVID-19. Prime Minister Joseph John Goutey has hailed the contribution of youth volunteers to the response against COVID-19 in Cameroon as a show of commitment to the ideals of nationhood. He has called for a judicious management of the volunteers on the field in order to enhance the impact of their work.
Over in the littoral region, 4 centers created in some schools are currently providing equipment for voluntary COVID-19 tests to check the spread of the pandemic. In the campaign championed by Governor Samuel Jodone Ivaha Dibois, face masks are also being distributed to city dwellers. Kikishi Lawrence tells us more.
The 4 centers are set up in some selected primary schools, given the temporary nature of the massive test period. The doctors and nurses were on hand to cater for the counseling needs of persons who may be tested positive, with the goal of leading them to quarantine centers. Be it in Bonasama, Daido, or Bonamusadi, the governor, Jodone Ivaha Dibois, was impressed with the turnout of volunteers to take the COVID test and get the results on the spot. The high point of the tour was the handing over of face masks to the anxious crowds that gathered around the governor, this being part of the education and information efforts to prevent COVID infections. The governor expressed joy at the relative stability in the management of COVID-19 in the region, as 94 people have died this far of the 60,000 tested. He, however, called on those who still doubt the disease to review their stance and join the others in implementing the prevention methods, especially the wearing of face masks in public places.
We have just seen that at the level of some markets, people are not wearing their masks, and we are asking all the divisional officers, the mayors, to make an effort to go back to those places to ask people to wear those masks.
The littoral region has the second highest number of deaths due to COVID-19 in Cameroon.
Female Bageli pygmies in Nyete subdivision and Ocean Division are now better equipped to hold the spread of the coronavirus in their community. They benefited from a 2-day training on the production of locally made soap, sanitizers and face masks. The coaching was jointly organized by the Ministry of Forestry and Wildlife and the African Wildlife Foundation. Polycarp Ati tells us more.
The 2-day training on the production of face mask, hand sanitizer, and locally made soap in Yamambande village in the Nyete subdivision of the Ocean Division aimed at empowering the pygmy populations living around the National Conservation Camp Man Park for a better riposte for the deadliest enemy, COVID-19, by using simple and less expensive means.
To empower the minority that they are living around the Campo Man National Park, where their activities are solely dependent in the forest, and with the pandemic of coronavirus outside, they would thought it wise that we can empower them locally for them to be able to manufacture soap, so that they can be able to fight against the virus.
Trainees, on their part, thanked the Ministry of Wildlife for the initiative and say the knowledge acquired in the training will help them stay safe from the virus.
I have learned how to make face masks, soap and hand sanitizers. Thanks to this training, I will be able to stay safe from that disease, as I can now produce the preventive kits myself.
The training of other women will continue in other villages of the Nyete subdivision in the days ahead.
Food items and COVID-19 preventive material have been offered to inmates of the Garo main prison. The benefactor is a network of female counselors led by Odile Majili. Louisa Akwanka Achato reports on the philanthropic gesture in the penitentiary.
The network of female counselors of the North region, mindful of the elevated risk of cross-contamination within such close-knit environments as prisons, as well as challenges associated with daily rationing therein, as a consequence of the onset and onslaught of the coronavirus pandemic, thought it beneficial to come to the aid of the most hard-pressed inmates of the Garo main prison, women and minors, through the donation of bags of rice, face masks and other COVID-19 prevention kits.
I thank the Association of Women Councillors of the region of Now for the gesture they have done.
Assisting vulnerable persons to the best of their ability, the president of the association is their driving force, especially within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, a course of action they say they engage in non-stop to accompany the government in its fight to eventually get rid of the disease, definitely.
Away from COVID-19 news, Cameroon and the European Union are meeting to discuss how to lift the temporal ban of the EU airspace on Cameroon. Attended by the Minister of Public Health, Manawuda Malashi, and other members of government, European diplomats exchanged on the travel restrictions imposed due to the coronavirus. Charles Ebonner reports on the meeting attended by External Relations Minister, His Excellency Lejeune Belambela.
A few days ago, the European Union authorized just 15 countries to use our airspace, one from Africa, Rwanda in particular. Cameroon was one of the countries excluded from the European Union travel space authorization. Any resumption soon?
Maybe it's a bit soon to talk about dates or horizons for opening.
The meeting held at the Ministry of External Relations between Cameroon and ambassadors or diplomats of the European Union member countries present in Cameroon was to iron out things and bring things to normalcy prior to the COVID-19 crisis, responsible for the temporal ban.
I was particularly pleased that the ministers of transport and health were also present because they could update the European side on the measures taken by Cameroon to, first of all, respond to the COVID crisis.
Alongside External Relations Minister Belambela, Cameroonian authorities discussed with European diplomats how to return things to normalcy. Cameroon and the European Union are working together to ensure the airspace on both sides returns to the pre-COVID-19 situation very soon.
We should bear in mind that negligence by a single individual can seriously harm the entire community.
7 cities in Cameroon are part of an inclusive and resilient project initiated by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. In 6 years, the program will require the strategic investments for sustainable human investments. It was launched by Minister Celestine Keja-Coutez in Yaoundé, as we hear in this report by Maimuna Njoya.
The mobilization of resources for the development of cities that respond to the primary needs of local populations, such as roads and employment opportunities, not leaving out the all-needed decentralization momentum, is the essence of the project for the development of inclusive and resilient cities. The project, which will be executed within 6 years, is being carried by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development with financial support from the World Bank.
This project will support the head of state to build road, drains, to give work to young people and young women in the neighborhood who need it.
The 2020 budget and roadmap for this project on inclusive and resilient cities have been defined during a video conference with different stakeholders in the ranks of mayors and members of civil society organizations. Minister Celestine Keja-Coutez, who presided over a steering committee meeting, finally specified that all must be done to project a positive image of cities in Cameroon as desired by the head of state.
Still on urban development projects, the Northwest has a new regional president of the United Cities of Councils of Cameroon. The mayor of Fundong, Denis Awo Ndang, was elected by his peers and challenged to ensure the effective implementation of government's decentralization and reconstruction plan. Mabel Menkemdi Sakem tells us more from the Northwest.
This is the 7th regional president of the United Councils and Cities Cameroon Northwest chapter. Denis Ndang, mayor of Fundong, says he is heading a team whose priorities are to restore peace and fight unemployment.
The region has a lot of manpower, and the manpower needs to be developed. We need a lot of development too in this region. As the mayors, one of our main duties is to bring development to our areas. We can do this through employment and infrastructure.
3 members of the Northwest branch of the UCC, led by Anthony Ndingambong, have also been delegated to project the Northwest region at the national level.
Make sure that all documents come out in French and English. All programs are done in French and English for our national and why not our international image.
Northwest Governor Adolphe Lille-Lafrique has challenged the elected officials to assist government to fully implement decentralization and reconstruction of the crisis-hit Northwest region.
A wood transformation firm to enable local councils in the South region generate revenue to fund their development ventures will soon go operational. This is part of a program developed by the Integrated Development Program for Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, also aimed at creating employment opportunities for the youth. Pontianos Lawon reports on the plan intended to foster the sustainable management of forest resources.
The COVID-19 pandemic has imposed an untold socio-economic slowdown in its area of competence, but the Integrated Development Program for the Cameroon-Gabon Equatorial Guinea 3-border zone has braved the storm. In 2019, the program trained 475 farmers on agro-pastoral entrepreneurship with the aim of rendering them financially autonomous.
If you have to transform our local product, we need producers that can produce in a regular manner, in quantity and quality.
Warehouses are also under construction in Vangan, Kiosi and Olamze. With the 2020 budget that stands at CFA 445 million francs, the program intends to, amongst others, create a 700-hectare farm to experiment with production.
The government is paying a lot of money to import wheat. How not? We have to try if this wheat can be produced locally. So we start by experimenting this. The first one was successful.
The projects are enormous, but the major obstacle identified by the steering committee is insufficient funds.
This important program has a main problem, which is the mobilization of state resources and other resources.
The steering committee has expressed the wish for Gabon and the Equatorial Guinea to set up similar development programs so as to create what they term a co-prosperity zone along their common frontiers.
Similarly, the Livestock Development Program is reaching out to breeders in the Far North region with a donation of ICT tools that will facilitate distancing. Conscious of the COVID-19 scare, the equipment that will link the external and central services of the Ministry of Livestock, Fisheries and Animal Industries will enhance animal production and also roll back poverty. Sylvester Atemking tells us more from the Far North.
The information and communication technology tools donated by the Livestock Development Program, better known in its French acronym as PRODER, to the 6th Divisional Delegation of Livestock, Fisheries and Animal Industries of the Far North region, is to support research and ease the prevention and data collection on animal diseases.
To help our service to transmit information about animals' health and to work in teleconference.
The ICT gadgets will also facilitate the access to information through an improved digital system.
Those materials will help me to improve the quality of data that I'm going to transmit to my hierarchy and to send them very quickly.
To the divisional delegates, the tools will enable them to accomplish their tasks and improve on computerized database management.
It means transmission of information at time, in terms of disease control, disease surveillance.
The donation falls in line with PRODER's mission to support the Ministry of Livestock, Fisheries and Animal Industries in attaining their goals.
As we announced in one of our top stories, the national station of the Cameroon Radio Television Corporation, CRTV, is innovating and injecting fresh impetus into its content. The most recent is the new format of the weekend newscasts at 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., which henceforth witnesses a dual presentation to create a better link between the regions. Joyce Tata reports on the first broadcast launched yesterday under the supervision of the Central Director of Radio, Dr. George Ewane Ngide.
2020 second segment kickstarts on a new page for the 7 and 8 p.m. weekend news on the national station.
The news read by Sam Bokuba in Yaoundé.
And I am Olivia Mboye Ambai in Boya.
A dual presentation, new jingles and a package which cuts across culture, sport, national and foreign news for a better output.
There's an innovation for the Director General. For this month, we present Yaoundé and Boya in the English language. That is at 7 p.m. This will change next month because we'll move from Boya to Bamenda. So we want to reach as many homes as possible.
Management through this move brings to table editorialists and senior reporters in the structure to entice listeners with mind-blowing reports.
The advantage we think we have in this is that it permits us to know what is happening in the different regions in time. It also permits us to discover new talents.
The maiden edition of both newscasts hit the airwaves under the supervision of the hierarchy, barely 1 week old in his new office, ensuring a hitch-free launching, even at the level of presenters.
It comes with a fear of making a faux pas. Everything went on well, thanks in large part to the many hands that came on deck.
Rachel Malongo and Jose Vitote's 8 p.m. newscast comes to an end. A sigh of relief is heaved and the rendezvous taken for the next edition with this invitation.
To stay tuned, because the best is yet to come.
And it's slightly above 7:50. We'll take you to our usual rendezvous. The battle against the coronavirus in communities is heightening as local authorities and the elite are being joined by the youth to sensitize and to provide assistance, especially to the vulnerable. Emphasis has been laid on the respect of barrier measures and the limitations of social gatherings. These are definitely not easy to respect, but have become an obligation in the country. Gilbert Ongene is at the Public Health Emergency Operations Center and now provides updates on the fight against the pandemic with his guest, Dr. Aimé Florence Kisugle. Hello, Gilbert.
Hi, Esther Kima. Welcome to the Public Health Emergency Operations Center. The news today is that Cameroon has gone past the bar of 15,000 infections. The statistics as at yesterday, the 10th of July 2020, point to the fact that we have 15,173 new confirmed cases of the COVID-19. with 11,298 recoveries recorded and 359 deaths this far, giving a mortality rate of 2.3%. During the press briefing that took place a while ago, Dr. Fane Mahamat emphasized on the need for the respect of barrier measures, especially in public places, as well as the putting on of face coverings or face masks whenever you are using public transport or when you find yourself in a crowd, basically in the office and markets and other places. And emphasis too was laid on the fact that nobody should put on a face mask when he's carrying out sporting activities, and face masks are not supposed to be used on kids less than 3 years old. As you rightly said a while ago, Esther, our guest tonight is Dr. Aimé Florence Kisugle, who is Controller number 1 at the Central Regional Delegation of Public Health, and you've understood that we are inaugurating the decentralization of treatment of the COVID-19 with today. And of course, today we'll have the guests from the Central Region, and next Saturday we'll have another from the Littoral Region. Hello, good evening to you, Dr. Aimé Florence Kisugle.
Good evening, Mr. Andoni.
Okay, now we want to find out from you, here in the Central Region, how is the screening for COVID-19 faring?
Thank you for this question, because since the decentralization phase, starting from the 6th of April this year, the Central Region is now intensifying the testing, the tracking, testing and treatment of new cases of COVID-19 in all the health districts of the Central Region.
Okay, and tell us, we know that the Central Region is very much well equipped and has many treatment centers and any other part of the country, medical staff too inclusive. Are the patients satisfied this far? How far are you meeting up with expectations?
Thank you very much for this question, because most of the patients who are giving us the feedback of the treatment are satisfied. And we are really satisfied of the work that the health personnel is doing. And we are not alone, because we are also dealing with the security forces and other administration who are helping us to make the cares of patients to be the best one.
Well, that's the difficulties that you face this far. I'm sure everything is not perfect.
Everything cannot be perfect. You know, the COVID-19 epidemic is something that surprised all the countries over the world, and the common country is not a part of that. Then we are doing all our best to do what we are supposed to do and to take care of the patients during the phase of the disease. But we still face some problems, like patients who are not accepting to go to health to agri treatment centers where they normally have to be well treated, to be well taken care, and so on. We are also facing the problem of fake news, because most of the community problem that we face now is fake news, because we are tracking people in the community now. We are tracking patients, we are tracking cases, suspected cases that we are directing to testing sites. But people are still trusting to fake news that, no, if you have COVID-19, maybe you will die, you will surely die. No, COVID-19 is something that people have just invented to have money from the strangers and other organizations. Then we are advising people to accept to come to be tested, and when they are tested positive, they should accept also to go to treatment centers.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Aimé Florence Kisugle, Controller number 1 at the Central Regional Delegation of Public Health. Well, Esther, you must retain that we have 15,173 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 in Cameroon as at yesterday, 11,298 recoveries, and 359 deaths, giving a mortality rate of 2.3%. Over to you, studio.
Very much, Gilbert, for those figures and also on the details on what government has been doing to decentralize the testing for COVID-19 in all the health districts in the Central Region. As just like you say, in our subsequent newscast, we'll be finding out if that is what obtains in other regions. On to this sad note, the immortal remains of the registrar of the University of Bamenda, Professor Victor Banlilong, have been laid to rest in Bamenda. The political scientist, praised by his colleagues for his standards and care for humanity, will be sorely missed by the education community. The funeral was attended by dignitaries, amongst them Governor Adolphe Lily Lafrique of the Northwest Region. Eric Langmia-Wofo reports on the funeral.
Tears of sorrow for a man described by his contemporaries as easygoing and caring. Professor Victor Banlilong passes on, aged 53, leaving many with memories of his savoir-faire.
He stood up and took the challenge to pay the salaries of the teachers of our school, which we are running as a congregation for the month of March in this 2020. And because of that challenge, other people were inspired and took the other months.
Professor Banlilong has taught me and mentored me for 13 years. He was a great teacher. He looked beyond the academic, where he can come in, where he can assist you to be a better student.
To his loved ones, Professor Banlilong provided the lifeline in difficult situations.
He took over the responsibilities that I had when I was still working and took care of many of the children in the family.
Professor Banlilong Victor started his career as assistant lecturer of political science at the Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria and returned to Cameroon and worked in the same capacity in the University of Boya. He was appointed registrar in the University of Bamenda in 2017, the post he occupied before his passing away on July 7, 2020.
May his soul rest in peace. And on another sad note, Cameroon's renowned female singer Mama Ngea has been buried in her native Tonde in Kam Division of the Littoral region. Her mortal remains were coffined yesterday in Douala in the presence of colleagues, fans and family members who accompanied her to her final resting place today. Roslyn Fossa tells us more.
Her voice, lyrics that left nobody indifferent, and her charisma as an artist are not just contained in CDs. Legendary Makossa icon Mama Ngea has been covered by the ground of Tonde village in the Kam Division of the Littoral. Family members, colleagues, and those who have always appreciated her art paid their last respect to the artist, whose works today remain legacy.
She had more to offer, but God has better plans for her. May she rest in peace, and I want her to tell our mom that we are trying our best to make her wish come true, which is to see us united. I covered 365 kilometers to be here thanks to what we have accomplished in 30 years. We recorded her first album, which was a success. We are very proud of her and wish that God should keep her close to him.
Her career, which spanned 3 decades, was marked by the release of several titles almost transformed in anthems, notably Soleil de Décembre, Etofis and Ebongwa Londo, which earned her 2 decorations, Knight of the National Order of Valor and Officer of the Order of Merit, achievements which the representative of the Minister of Arts and Culture, Théophile Eyango, did not fail to acknowledge. There is a time to sing Soleil de Décembre and other but there also comes a moment when those who enjoy these creations have to bid you farewell. That time has come for Mama Ngea. Rest in peace.
The artist is gone, but her works will live on for eternity. Out of Cameroon, the people of Côte d'Ivoire continue to mourn their Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly, who died at the age of 61 last July 8. Ivorian President, His Excellency Alassane Ouattara, says the late Prime Minister had embodied a young generation of Ivorian executives of great competence and extreme loyalty. He was the nominated candidate of the ruling Houphouët's Rally for Democracy and Peace for the October 31 presidential election. Charles Ebonel now looks at the impact of his death on the electoral process.
8 days of national mourning to mourn deceased Prime Minister of the Côte d'Ivoire with one key interrogation.
Who is going to succeed Ahmed Gon Coulibaly as the candidate for the Rally of Houphouëtist for Democracy Party, the RHDP, who is the outgoing president's political party?
The deceased Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly was the ruling party's choice for elections 3 months from now, presidential elections.
Alassane Dramane Ouattara's candidature would rally opposition parties behind Henri Konan Bédié, making it a more polarized political competition than anticipated.
Speculations are open for the West African country with a stable economy after some years of political turbulence.
Alassane Dramane Ouattara decides to support one of the politicians from the RHDP that comes from the north. So there he would choose somebody like Amadou Bictogo, who's a major influential businessman that has been close to him, Alassane Dramane Ouattara, since the beginning of the 1990s.
The Côte d'Ivoire for years now has witnessed some political drama, and this may just be yet another one.
And that will be all for this edition of the 7:30 p.m. newscast, in which you heard that the African Anti-Corruption Day has been observed to coordinate and to intensify the fight against the vice, with emphasis laid on the role of efficient judicial systems. At 8:30 p.m., you'll be in the company of Ata Badine. Stay home if you can. If you can't stay home, when you go out, stay protected. Good night and stay tuned to the programs of CRTV. I'll be back tomorrow, God willing.
Each of us must comply with the measures that have been taken.